He was the 15th richest person in Canada. She was a top philanthropist. Barry and Honey Sherman lauded as pillars of the community. Now murdered in their home, found side by side, strangled, bound to a railing next to their indoor pool.
Both Honey and Barry Sherman were in fact targeted.
But targeted by whom? He had a long list of business enemies.
He said, "They're out to get me. I'm surprised they haven't knocked me off already."
Or could it be murder most personal?
For somebody to go to their house and murder the both of them, it was personal.
And was it a hatred that simmered for years?
I probably had reasons to lash out, to do the dirty deed.
Did you kill Honey and Barry Sherman?
I'm Bob McKeown on this edition of The Fifth Estate, the mystery of the Sherman murders. It could have been mistaken for a state funeral. A mayor, a premier, and the prime minister. A fitting tribute to two of Canada's wealthiest and most generous citizens. Thousands saying goodbye to billionaire businessman Barry Sherman and his wife Honey Sherman, the philanthropist. Their son Jonathan put into words what many saw as his parents' special partnership.
You were like a lock and a key, each pretty useless on your own. But together, you unlocked the whole world for yourselves, and for us, and for so many others.
And there also were unvarnished memories about how stubborn Barry Sherman could be.
He could project arrogance. With Barry, it was no bullshit. Pretty much all of the time.
But even on a day for fond reflection, on everyone's mind was an unspoken question. Who killed Barry and Honey Sherman? When they were last seen alive, 8 days before, all seemed well in the Shermans' world, with imminent plans to spend the holidays in Florida with family. As usual that morning, Barry left for the 20-minute drive to work in his 1999 Mustang convertible. The CEO of generic drug manufacturer Apotex was known to arrive early and leave late. Later that afternoon, his wife Honey drove her SUV to meet him at the office, where they discussed plans for their new 16,000 square foot mansion with their architects. The plans included indoor and outdoor pools, an elevator, a gym, and an event room. After their meeting with the architect, Honey left Apotex in her champagne-colored Lexus. Barry to follow later. And as he made the return trip down the highway towards home, Barry Sherman had a lot on his mind. He was under investigation for improper political fundraising, was cooperating with police in a criminal fraud probe, and was the target of a bitter family feud that threatened to destroy his legacy. What's more, it would be the last time he would ever make that familiar drive. 2 days later, their real estate agent made a gruesome discovery. The Shermans' bodies were found side by side, their necks tied with belts to a railing by their indoor pool. A violent end to the lives of two remarkable Canadians, but also so much more than that. The killing gruesomely staged, husband and wife strangled and left splayed together. A taunting scene with the essential question unanswered. Who hated them enough to do this? From the beginning, it was clear Barry Sherman was driven to succeed. His father died when he was just 9 years old. But he was smart, very smart. He entered university at 16, studied engineering at U of T, and went on to a graduate degree from MIT in Boston. Still a teen, he started learning the generic drug business from his uncle, Lou Winter, who owned a Toronto company called Empire Labs. Lou Winter's son, Kerry.
Barry lost his father when he was 9, and my father, Uncle Lou, took him under his wing and actually brought him into the business and gave him a summer job and I guess taught him the world of generics.
When his uncle Lou Winter died, Barry Sherman bought Empire Labs, and through a series of shrewd corporate moves, was soon on his way to control of the corporation that would become Apotex, the largest generic drug company in Canada. Generic drug manufacturers essentially make copies of medication produced by brand name companies. Sherman saw himself as an underdog up against Big Pharma, who were gouging Canadians with high drug prices. And he wasn't averse to making his opinions known in public, like here in 1986.
The multinationals are simply parasites that come into Canada, set up branch plants simply for the purpose of exploiting our market to the maximum for their own benefit.
It was a true street fight.
Aubrey Dan's family ran Canada's other generic pharmaceutical company, Nova Pharm. He recalls Sherman as a ruthless competitor.
We always kept our eye on him because he always wanted to push it to the maximum and see what he could do. And there are times where he was greatly rewarded, and there are times where he pushed it too much.
But he also was a man unafraid of making enemies, famous for his lawsuits, hundreds of them that became Sherman's go-to weapon in that industrial street fight. On one side, Big Pharma, protecting their patents. On the other side, the cheaper generic knockoffs, muscling in on their territory, with billions of dollars at stake.
All over the office there are stacks of documents relating to litigation, filing cabinets, full of them all over the floor as well.
He used to tell me when he would win a lawsuit, oh, I lost this one, or I would win this one, and I couldn't keep up. I think he relished in that, beating the brand name companies.
Author Jeffrey Robinson investigated those Big Pharma wars more than a decade ago.
He was hated by Big Pharma. He was as big as it gets in Canada, and he was a major player in North America, so that he had enemies all over the place.
And for some of his Big Pharma enemies, it got personal. Barry Sherman, their target, hiring private investigators to try to sabotage him.
They were trying to plant something up. And it turns out that the orders have been given either to put kiddie porn in his pocket or a kilo of cocaine in his trunk, something like that, to compromise him and take him completely out of the game.
Sherman's cousin, Kerry Winter, remembers his reaction.
And he told me in his office one day, he says, you know, they're trying to set me up, he said. And then I went, get out of here. Barry goes, no, I'm serious. They're trying to frame me up.
And Big Pharma kept coming after him. One major company hired spies to pose as Apotex employees to collect dirt on Barry Sherman.
He knew about these detectives having lunch behind the factory on picnic tables, watching what was coming in and out of the back door. So he was very cautious.
But under Sherman, Apotex could play hardball too. A recent court case alleges that one of his top executives had an affair with a woman in a rival company and ended up with thousands of pages of trade secrets. Apotex has called the case frivolous. It may sound like something from a spy thriller, but Sherman was convinced his competitors were out to get him. Apotex once told the New York Times, Mr. Sherman has received death threats. And Sherman himself made dark jokes about the possibility of being eliminated by his competition.
He said, for $1,000, you can probably get somebody killed. He, in his paranoia, wondered if maybe somebody should have knocked him off by now, because that would have ended the whole problem for the other side.
Indeed, in the wake of the deaths in December, Toronto police have obtained search warrants for the Apotex offices and other corporate locations, searching for a possible business link to the killings. When we come back, a family's public life and private secrets.
And I said, what's going on? He said, oh, they just found Barry and Honey's body in the house. And I just calmly said to him on the phone, I don't believe it. He finally did it.
There's always more to our stories. You can keep up with the Fifth Estate by subscribing to our weekly newsletter. We'll tell you what we're working on and share updates on past stories. Sign up on our website at cbc.ca/fifth.
What happened in mid-December at number 50 Old Colony Road in Toronto remains a mystery. Not only about the motive for the murders of Barry and Honey Sherman, but who could have been angry enough to carry them out. And behind it all, the dark corners of the Sherman family saga, a complex tale of betrayal and broken relationships that continue to this day.
The whole relationship was based on lies and deception.
Kerry Winter is Barry Sherman's first cousin. As police investigators compile the names of those who could have wanted the Shermans dead, even Winter himself admits he might be on that list.
And anybody who knows Barry Sherman will tell you that.
Emotional, anxious, and angry, Kerry Winter leaves no doubt he felt deeply betrayed by Barry Sherman, and he wanted revenge.
So I was heartbroken. I was betrayed. My cousin hurt me, and now I want to hurt him.
There are conflicted feelings about a man Kerry Winter says he learned to hate, and they came to a head in September 2017 when Winter lost a bitter 10-year court battle against his cousin Barry. During the case, Sherman was called to a lawyer's office to face questions under oath. The Fifth Estate has obtained the audio tapes from that examination, in which Barry Sherman defends his conduct in the relationship with Kerry and the orphaned cousins.
I did everything I could to help her. And they should either accept my offer or find a better one.
To understand what happened, you've got to go back to a family dispute that had its roots half a century ago. And it begins with this man, Kerry Winter's father, Lou Winter, who brought his young nephew into the family drug business, the teenage Barry Sherman. Empire Labs was a growing and successful generic pharmaceutical business in Toronto. Then, tragedy struck.
I was only 4 at the time, and on November 5th, 1965, my father passed away. And 17 days later, on November 22nd, my mother passed, leaving me and my 3 brothers orphaned.
That also left Empire Labs without its founder. Lou Winter had taught his nephew Barry the business, so it seemed fitting that 2 years later Barry Sherman bought his uncle's drug company from the family estate. At first, Barry Sherman made sporadic visits to his young cousins at their adoptive home, but he would soon lose contact with the Winter boys altogether.
I didn't see them. There was no need or no point. I have cousins all over the world. I don't go see them. I have lots of cousins I haven't seen in decades.
While the generic drug business made Barry Sherman a wealthy man, his cousins were struggling. For some, there were scrapes with the law and the grip of drug addiction. For Kerry, it was heroin, then crack cocaine.
I was a full-blown crack addict. You don't need to be smoking crack for 5 or 10 years to experience the bottom and the despair that particular drug can bring. I mean, I'm not proud of the fact that I was a crackhead, but I was.
Then, years later, Kerry Winter would be reintroduced to his long-lost cousin, Barry Sherman.
And my brother Dan would go on and on about this Barry Sherman, this cousin who was very rich. And I said, oh, who is he? And he said, oh, he got our father's business, and he wants to meet you. And so, of course, that's how it all started.
When they came to see me, they were in trouble. They were drug addicts. Kerry was a drug addict. Dana was a drug addict.
After a 16-year absence, suddenly Barry Sherman seemed ready to help, and he took the Winter boys under his wing.
I did everything I could to help them, even to start their own businesses. With Kerry here, I said to him, asked him, what is it you want to do, Kerry? You got to make something out of yourself. He said he wanted to do renovations. I said, fine, I'll finance a renovations business for you. Get some training, buy a property, work on it.
We will go inside and take a look now. Thank you. Yep.
And Kerry took him up on that offer. Barry Sherman funded his education and bankrolled his home renovation company.
Yep. I had this billionaire who was about to give me anything I wanted. He said, I want to help you make a life for yourself. It slowly started off with a couple $100,000, but within 3, 4, 5 years, it was houses and cottages and sports cars, and literally it steamrolled and snowballed into about 15 years later being about 5, 6, 7 million.
But Kerry Winter says Honey Sherman was not enthusiastic about her husband's renewed relationship with his cousins. He says she had some tough questions for him at their house one day.
And I didn't understand her line of questions. What do you want with my husband? Or how much money is he giving you? And she started to berate me. And I remember leaving that days thinking something was amiss.
It all raised an obvious issue. Why was Barry Sherman being so generous with his cousins? Kerry wondered if there might be an ulterior motive.
When I look back on it, as wired I was on drugs, why would a billionaire continue to give me millions and millions of dollars when I never showed a profit? It wasn't like I was building custom homes and selling them and making money. I was losing money, and he would increase the line of credit at the Bank of Montreal, and he always made me sign promissory notes. So financially, this idea that Barry Sherman was giving me money was not the truth. I was beholden to him. I was under his thumb.
I don't even know what circumstance you're talking about.
In this audio testimony, Sherman had a very different view of things.
So I'm simply saying that I'm a person who does like to help friends and relatives and other people to the extent that I reasonably can. I think I'm a generous person. Who else would spend $15 million trying to help cousins establish careers for themselves?
But Kerry Winter couldn't shake the notion there was another reason for that generosity. He wondered if it could have something to do with his father's drug company, which Barry Sherman bought all those years before.
I then went to my cousin and asked him specifically, Barry, how did you get my father's business?
After some digging, Kerry Winter uncovered a long-buried family agreement.
And I'm going to tell you, I was blown away. I was shocked. I did not see that coming.
He learned that when Barry Sherman bought their father's company, he agreed Kerry and his brothers could each acquire 5% of it. But Kerry says their cousin Barry never told them anything about that.
And I just remember calling him saying, you lied to me, Barry. You lied to me. And he said that was true. And I said, why did you lie to me?
It was the beginning of what would be a 10-year legal battle. Winter versus Sherman. Sherman versus Winter. And Barry Sherman was adamant, if not for him, Lou Winter's former company would have gone under.
So it was apparent that the company would be closed down and there'd be no value at all within a matter of months. If I didn't run the business, it would go insolvent.
Would stare at you and he would get you.
And according to Kerry Winter, Barry Sherman warned him not even to think about suing.
And he said, you know, not too many people have a cousin Barry. Do you know what I mean by that, Kerry? And I said, well, I'm really lucky, Barry. I'm really lucky to have you in my corner. He says, do you hear what I'm saying? Are you thinking of coming after me? Because if you do, and he leaned forward and he looked at me, he says, you won't beat me. Do you understand that? Do you know who I am?
After years of bitter litigation, finally last September, the Ontario Superior Court ruled against the claim by Kerry Winter and his brothers for 20% of Barry Sherman's fortune. The court decided that original agreement applied only to Lou Winter's former company, Empire Labs, which Barry Sherman had sold off before he formed Apotex. Even worse, his cousin Barry was calling in all the IOUs Kerry Winter had signed for the cash advances he'd been given over all those years. So Kerry Winter now owed Barry Sherman $8 million.
And I would say it in a...
Winter insists all that was left between him and Barry was his hatred.
He wasn't this loving, kind person giving money away, pillar of the Jewish community. He cared about one thing: money, making lots of it, and not caring who he destroyed, who he stepped on, or who he fucked over, like me and my brothers.
Still devastated and depressed from those court decisions, just a few months later, in mid-December, Kerry Winter got a phone call he'll never forget from a friend.
He said, oh, they just found Barry and Honey's body in the house. And I just calmly said to him on the phone, I don't believe it. He finally did it. I said he killed her. And to this day, in this moment in front of you, I've never shedded a tear about that, and I've never questioned it.
So that wasn't a quip, that was something you truly believe?
Absolutely. And I know for a fact that, how do we say, there was a little history between Barry and I.
It was that history between them which led Kerry Winter to make an unbelievable assertion. He says despite the Toronto police ruling that the Sherman deaths were a double homicide, there's a decades-old reason why he believes Barry Sherman killed his wife. He maintains Sherman had tried to do it before. And another amazing claim, Kerry said Barry had asked him to help.
And there was a time in his office that he turned to me and he said, Kerry, I want you to do me a favor. And I said, what's that, Barry? He said, I want you to whack my wife. And I said, come on, Barry. You want me to kill your wife? He goes, I didn't say you. You know some people. Could you arrange that for me? And I said, you're serious? You're asking me to arrange whacking your wife? And he said, yeah, I hate her. And I said, Barry, I'll go ahead and do that. And I did. I planned it and I set it up.
Did you think perhaps I should warn Honey? Perhaps I should
I hated
call
her too.
the police?
No, I didn't like Honey. As a matter of fact, at the time, as twisted as I was, I relished in the idea. And I looked at it like I was helping my cousin. I couldn't say no.
What do you believe members of the family and their legal representatives will say about this?
I think they would say that he's possibly lying. He's trying to drag Barry's good name through the mud. He's got a hidden agenda. He's got a vendetta. He's being spiteful, vengeful.
Are any or all of those things true?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that I have a level of hatred.
After the break, Kerry Winter's story is put to the lie detector test.
You know, I probably had reasons to lash out, to do the dirty deed.
You count on the Fifth Estate for investigative journalism that matters. The Fifth Estate team often counts on you, the viewers, for tips that lead to some of the best investigations.
I had a story.
We felt uncomfortable.
Very disturbing.
To send your tips, email fifthtips@cbc.ca or go to the show website to find out other ways to get in touch.
In the immediate aftermath of the Sherman deaths, there were more questions than answers. In particular, was it a murder-suicide or a double murder? After a 6-week investigation, police were unequivocal. Both Honey and Barry Sherman were victims of a targeted homicide. But Kerry Winter refuses to believe the official Toronto police version. The disgruntled cousin, who had the bitter decade-long dispute claiming a piece of the Sherman fortune, is sticking to his belief it was Barry Sherman who killed his wife. And he makes the outrageous claim that his cousin Barry wanted to kill his wife Honey 2 decades before.
He just wanted her gone. He wanted her gone.
But then, Kerry Winter says, at the last minute, Barry Sherman got cold feet.
I called him and said, you know, there's no turning back, Barry. If I push the button, and he said, no, don't do it. And that's when I said, then don't bring it up again, and he never did.
If that story sounds like it might have been concocted, we wondered about that too. 2 of Winter's friends claim he told the story to them at the time. But was it true? So we asked Kerry Winter to take a lie detector test. While not admissible in court due to possible inaccuracies, the polygraph is commonly used in the justice system. John Gallianis is a former Quebec homicide investigator and a veteran polygraph examiner.
You got to twist me left and right, find out what ticks. I know what you guys are doing.
The blood pressure cuff doesn't go here, it goes right here.
Is it true?
No. Now put your arms up like if you're going to jump in a pool.
After a long pretest, Gallianos wired him up and started his questions.
Here, put your arms in here. Okay, lean forward a bit. Do you understand? I will only ask you the questions we discussed.
Yes.
Concerning the hitman request from Barry Sherman to cause the death of his wife, do you intend to answer truthfully about that?
Yes.
Are you lying when you say that Barry Sherman told you that he wanted his wife killed?
No.
We watched the test unfold from an adjacent room, along with Western University criminologist Mike Arntfield.
Are you lying when you say that Barry Sherman told you he wanted his wife killed?
No.
Look at that.
Look at the height of it. It's above twice the height of...
Yeah.
I mean, that's one line, but that's often the... I mean, all lines are up. Look at 3 panels earlier. Look where the baseline is up.
The entire process takes about 3 hours, but the feedback is almost instant.
Okay.
Can I ask how I did?
Yep, sure. I'll tell you right in a few minutes.
Well, I hope it's good.
Yeah.
But for Kerry Winter, it's not good news.
See, result, significant reactions.
Is that good?
No, it's no good.
Oh.
And the thing is, what that means is there's something that you're hiding in. There's
So I
something
failed.
Yeah, you failed. Yeah, you failed.
And that's when Kerry's story begins to unravel. First, his memory of the alleged murder plot starts to change. Did he and Barry Sherman really talk about killing Honey more than once, as Kerry had claimed?
Was it possible that he didn't ask you a second time?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Very. But I still believe it. I don't know why in my head I believe he asked me twice.
Was it possible he didn't ask you a second time?
Yeah.
What percentage do you feel that he only asked you once? What would be the percentage?
Pretty high.
Like how? Close to 100?
Yeah. Yeah, he only asked me once.
Winter had just altered a key part of his claim, and that was only the beginning. He soon would admit he had made up other crucial details.
It would have been not months or weeks, it would have been within a few days.
Okay, he called it off within a few days, right? As opposed to months and weeks? What would you say,
me
months?
a second time.
Okay, okay. I mentioned the second time, which is false, right?
Yes. That's the only explanation I have. That I could have embellished it and said 2 times, and that she was getting close to being done and she was 20 hours away, and that could have been an embellishment. Because I honestly think there was this button idea and that she was 20 hours away from going.
Mm. This button thing was bullshit, right?
Looking back, and I don't know if that's true or not, where I would have dreamt that up, though. Why I would have dreamt it up.
Maybe the drugs. Maybe the drugs.
Possibly, or to make it a more drama-oriented fiasco.
So his allegation that Barry Sherman was involved in a murder plot was crumbling.
Well, I'm just completely baffled. Like, I'm baffled.
Watch your head.
I'm completely baffled because I didn't think this would happen.
Hold on a minute. Stay here. I'm going to get the detective.
Fucking failed, man.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
They show he was lying, and the test results, the polygraphist confirms that.
Criminologist and former detective Mike Arntfield, who monitored the test, says the only possible explanation for Kerry Winter's failure is that his account of the murder plot wasn't true. And it all begs the question, why tell that story in the first place?
I mean, why go through this whole song and dance? That's really the underlying question here.
The Sherman family has endured immeasurable pain in the weeks since their parents were found dead. Added to that, Kerry Winter's story seems calculated and cruel. And the obvious follow-up question might be, should Kerry Winter himself be considered a suspect?
And that's something I'm sure the police are going to ask about. At this point, he needs to be properly cleared before moving on to other people, I would say.
Even Winter himself admits he had the motive.
You know, I probably had reasons to lash out, to do the dirty deed.
This would be asked of you by anybody. Did you kill Honey and Barry Sherman?
Absolutely not. I had nothing to do with it. I don't know who did it. I have my belief.
We also asked Kerry Winter if he would take a lie detector test on that question, but his lawyer and he refused. So we caught up with Kerry Winter one last time at a coffee shop in downtown Toronto to ask about the Sherman murders.
I mean, I had opportunity, I had motive. I can see why the police might say, this guy's also a fucking nut.
And he confessed to us he had indeed fantasized about killing Barry Sherman.
Like I would talk about killing Barry, and it was very graphic. The way I was going to do it wouldn't have been belts. It was going to be in the Apotex parking lot. That was my vision, always, that he'd come out of the building in Apotex and I'd be hiding behind a car, and I just decapitate him. I wanted to roll his head down the parking lot, and I just sit there waiting for the police.
With such vivid imagery, we had to wonder if he had an alibi for the murders. The Shermans' bodies were found on that Friday, but it's estimated they were killed between Wednesday and Thursday evenings. Kerry Winter says he was at work all day Thursday, but because he lives alone, he doesn't have an alibi for that entire Wednesday night.
No alibi. Wednesday night, I went to my Cocaine Anonymous meeting. I came home, as I usually do, watch some Netflix, eat some Doritos, fall asleep. Thursday night, same thing, went to work. Very easily for me to have left work at any time because I'm not on the clock, I'm a site supervisor. I can get in my car, I can take a 3-hour break during the day. I could easily have driven over to Colony and done the deed. I admit to that, but I didn't. And that's why I'm not nervous. Guys.
Kerry Winter left the coffee shop and headed out into the night. He said Toronto detectives had finally asked him to come in for an interview. He says they told him he's not a suspect and that there's no evidence he is. When we come back, what can we learn from how the Shermans were killed?
Consider the commitment and, quite frankly, the strength required to manually strangle someone, even strangle with a ligature. It's a very up-close, intimate, domineering, rage-induced manner of killing someone.
The story doesn't end here. Like the Fifth Estate's Facebook page so you can follow our investigations. We will post updates on stories and special video features that take you deep inside.
It was a Wednesday evening, December 13th, when Barry and Honey Sherman headed home for the last time. Each in their own car, she left at 6 p.m., he at 8:45. At the house on Old Colony Road in Toronto, Honey's Lexus arrived first. Later, Barry's Mustang pulled up and parked. It's believed neither ever left the house again. Two days afterwards, they were found tied by belts to the railing of their indoor pool. Reports say Honey Sherman had injuries to her face and was lying in blood. At one point, they'd both had their hands tied. We don't know if it happened separately or together, but the cause of their death was strangulation.
Consider the commitment and, quite frankly, the strength required to manually strangle someone, even strangle with a ligature.
Former police investigator, now university professor Mike Arnfield, says it appeared to be a very angry yet disciplined crime.
It's a very up-close, intimate, domineering, rage-induced manner of killing someone. The blood at the scene regardless, this was a relatively controlled scene.
That Friday afternoon in December, the news hit like a mortar.
Out of the mysterious death of a billionaire couple.
Barry Sherman and his wife Honey have been found dead,
mysteriously hanging from a railing on the edge of their indoor swimming pool.
Two of Canada's most successful and generous citizens, senselessly killed.
To be quite honest, I almost fell out of the car just hearing what he said to me.
Like many longtime friends, Post-Media CEO Paul Godfrey tried to piece together how it could have happened to people who'd given so much to so many.
No sign of forced entry. Somebody could have knocked on the door that he knew or she knew, and but that wouldn't be forced entry. Somebody let them in, or the door was unlocked and somebody walked in. Who knows?
It was 6 weeks to the day after Toronto police arrived at the murder scene that investigators gave their first public briefing on the case.
We have sufficient evidence to describe this as a double homicide investigation.
After 1,000 hours of investigation, 127 witness statements, and 20 search warrants, detectives said they now knew the Shermans had been intentionally murdered.
Both Honey and Barry Sherman were in fact targeted.
I think that term, whether it's through film and television, sort of conjures an image in people's heads that this must have been an assassination, that this must have been a murder for hire. All it means is that they were selected, they were marked for death, but it doesn't mean by a professional. I mean, certainly the way the scene has been depicted says anything but professional.
Criminologist Mike Arnfield believes the motive was both personal and financial, and he knows a lot about murder. He administers a huge American homicide database and says statistically the method used to kill the Shermans is extremely rare.
And since 1976, among 800,000 murders in the US, this has only happened 22 times, where you have an elderly individual over 65 and or an elderly couple strangled over a money-related issue in their own home.
The good news, such as it is that of those 22 most unusual murders, all 22 cases were solved. The house where the Shermans lived and died has now been turned over to a team of private investigators hired by the family, working to uncover evidence of what took place here that the police so far have not. The Shermans' family and friends are hoping they do so, and fast.
I knew him for 17 years. He was the best friend I ever had. He was like a brother.
Frank D'Angelo was Barry Sherman's friend and business partner. He says he only wishes his pal had been more careful about his own security.
I used to fight with Barry all the time because he used to leave his place of business in the shroud of darkness. And that's a billionaire. And if anybody, whether it was somebody in the industry of industrial espionage, they could have just got him there and been at the airport before the police knew what happened and gone.
According to D'Angelo, they'd spoken just a day before Sherman last was seen alive.
We always would say, I love you, bud. Love you. Yeah, that's the last thing he said. It's fucking crazy, eh? In a split second, things change forever.
And D'Angelo says he too is convinced the motivation for the murders was something personal.
For somebody to go to their house and murder the both of them, it was personal.
Author and journalist Jeffrey Robinson wrote about Barry Sherman.
In investigative journalism, you follow the money and you say, cui bono? Who benefits? Who benefits from having killed him last year? If he was in fact murdered, there's probably a long list of people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Barry had enemies. Barry made enemies.
Whatever we will yet learn about how they were killed and by whom, together Barry and Honey Sherman were larger-than-life Canadians. Their legacy, the billions they earned, and the tens of millions they gave away. But for now, they're known around the world for the unsolved murder mystery they left behind.